things are so uncomfortable that we can no longer ignore it, it forces us to dig deep and to make the changes we want to see if we're really fed up about it. So with the commute and then with being pregnant with my first child, I was really motivated to figure out how I could set myself up for success.
T-minus 10 seconds.
Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast with your host, Jamila Souffrant. As a money expert who walks her talk, she helps brave journeyers like you get out of debt, save, invest, and build real wealth. Join her on the journey to launch to financial freedom in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, Jamila here, host of this podcast and author of the book, Your Journey to Financial Freedom, a step-by-step guide to achieving wealth and happiness. Just a few years ago, I was in a job I didn't like with a long commute, feeling stuck. I knew there had to be a different, better way. Then I found the pathway to financial freedom and financial independence. Today, I have more money, options, and freedom than I ever thought was possible. And in my book, Your Journey to Financial Freedom, I'll show you how you can achieve that too. You'll learn how to spend and save responsibly, all while enjoying that spicy margarita and extra side of guacamole. Determine where you are on the journey and evaluate your spending and saving goals accordingly. Quit your job, retire early, or reach financial independence. My book, Your Journey to Financial Freedom, a step-by-step guide to achieving wealth and happiness, is out now and available on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, and more. You can even listen to the audiobook narrated by me. Go to yourjourneytofinancialfreedom.com to get a free bonus when you order the book and see all the places to buy it. Once again, go to yourjourneytofinancialfreedom.com. If you want the episode show notes for this episode, go to journeytolaunch.com or click the description of wherever you're listening to this episode. In the show notes, you'll get the transcribed version of the conversation, the links that we mentioned, and so much more. Also, whether you are an OG journeyer or brand new to the podcast, I've created a free jumpstart guide to help you on your financial freedom journey. It includes the top episodes to listen to, stages to go through. Okay, let's hop into the episode. Courses and so much more. You can go to journeytolaunch.com/jumpstart to get your guide right now. Okay, let's hop into the episode. Hey, journeyers. Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast. I am your, what I call Chief Launch Officer, Jamila Souffrant. And I'm so excited that you are here listening in with me today. And I just want to give you some credit, give yourself some credit, because if you are going to listen to this episode, or if this has piqued an interest based on you just following my work, the podcast, or you just seeing the podcast and said, you know what, let me play this, you are taking a step in the right direction to become financially free. And I know sometimes it doesn't seem like that if we're not taking big action and doing something with our money directly. But I am a big believer that the changes we want to see externally and that we want to measure with our money first start within. So with that comes immersing yourself or learning about your personal finances and specifically financial independence. So I'm going to take this opportunity to almost do a financial independence 101, a recap of things, because I realized that since starting this podcast back in 2017, which, wow, that's 7 years now? Like, it feels a bit crazy that, when I first started, I was much more, I think, in tune with the beginning stages of the journey for people, because I was in the beginning stages in terms of learning about financial independence, what it was. And I also feel like I shared more of my journey, my personal story and part of that was because I was still working when I had this podcast. So here I was growing this podcast, or at least starting the podcast and then eventually growing it on the side while I had my full-time job, and with these desires of being able to quit my job. So I feel like that hunger to reach financial independence, to one day quit my job, was where I focused on a lot. And so I kind of want to take it back there a bit, because I know that I am getting some new listeners and journeyers who are joining in on this journey. And so I thought it would just be helpful to kind of take it back and give just an overview of some financial topics and things that I talk about in the Journey to Launch / Your Journey to Independence, Your Journey to Financial Freedom world. So Journey to Launch is the podcast. Your Journey to Financial Freedom, a step-by-step guide to achieving wealth and happiness is the book. And the book came out December 2023. So depending on when you listen to this, came out a little bit ago. And it breaks down a lot of these concepts that I'm about to say and talk about if you are more of a person who learns and has to read versus someone who can listen to something and pick it up. But I think this will be really helpful because luckily for me, I feel like the book and my work has been introduced in new spaces and that there are people hearing this and they're just like, okay, but what is financial independence? What does she mean when she says journeyer or guac levels, or what are the 5 journeyer levels? So this will be just a overview of that. And I'll talk a little bit about my journey to getting here and what that took and what it looks like now. So let's go back a bit. I started the podcast. Well, the podcast was originally a blog to document my journey to financial independence. And I did that because I was consuming so much work around financial independence and general personal finance. And I'm separating the two because I do think they are different, even though they're intertwined. And I'll get into that in a bit. And so I was in this commute from Brooklyn to New Jersey that when I was not married, no kids, even though it was a nightmare anyway to commute, an hour and a half one way, I dealt with it because the stage of my life that I was in allowed for me to have more energy, more time. And so if I had to get up earlier or get home at 7 p.m., that was fine with me. And it wasn't until I started to have a family, I got pregnant with my first son, I realized that this was not something that was going to be sustainable, the commuting and staying in an office most of my days. It just wasn't something I wanted to do. And it's funny, and I think a lot of people, hopefully, if you're listening and you relate to this, you probably felt this before, is that I've always felt like that. It's not that I didn't want to work or that I was quote unquote lazy, which I think when we use those terms, sometimes it makes us feel bad about wanting to rest and not do what society and people tell us we have to do. So it kind of gets in our head. But there was something about me. Like I was always a go-getter. I was always ambitious. But when I got into like the confinements of corporate America, even though I enjoyed my coworkers for the most part, and I didn't mind what I did, I was earning good money, I just always felt like this is not my life. I was always the person sitting in the meeting, looking around. Like I felt like I was in almost like a show. Like there was cameras on me. And I'm like, am I the only one feeling or seeing this? So everyone seems so invested and in tuned to their job as they should be. And here I am looking out the window, and I'm like spacing out I just did not care as deeply. And I just couldn't make myself care enough. I was always wondering like this, especially when it was warmer. So I'm in New York and, the colder months, I don't mind, being inside. But when it was nice, sunny, warm outside, and we used to sit in the conference rooms and look out, and this was New Jersey. So we did, and this was like more of the more spacious, more land where I could see mountains or hills. I was just like, wow, I need to be out there somewhere. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do or what I wanted to do, but I was like, this is just not it. And it just made me feel like, am I the only one who feels this way? Am I the only one who wants to escape? And is something wrong with me? Because everyone in here looks very, very either happy or determined that this is their life. And I'm like, I don't want this to be my life. So all of that simmered in me for a while, all in my 20s. And it was in my early 30s that I got married and then got pregnant. And I was like, wait a second, like I'm building this life, I'm starting a family. I want more kids on top of this. And this is just not it. So this is when I do what I think a lot of people do, or some people who are like me do, is they search how to quit my job, how to retire early, all these phrases. And these podcasts, it wasn't like a bunch, but these blogs started popping up and podcasts. and I saw something called the FIRE movement. And I was like, let me click on this. What is the FIRE movement? I talk about this in the book, clicking on hyperlinks. So when something is of interest to you, sometimes you go for one thing and then you read something on a page or website, and then you see something highlighted, you click on that hyperlink and it takes you deeper somewhere else. And then before you know it, there are 10 tabs open and you're deeper into something or looking at something totally different, but it's still intriguing to you. But sometimes following those hyperlinks it's a godsend. It's a message that, depending on if you're ready to receive the message, can change your life. And so that's what I felt like happened with me, is that I found these ideas of financial independence and I saw the movement, the FIRE movement, and wanted to learn more about it. So I started to listen to podcasts on my commute and read blogs at work, where I was learning that there were people in the real world who were saving and investing their money aggressively in order to reach this idea of financial independence and retiring early, exiting the traditional workforce as we know it. So these people would aggressively save, sometimes 50% of their income or more, in order to quit their jobs and exit the workforce. And then they would do what they want. So some people that I listened to, they were entrepreneurs. So they would quit their 9-to-5s and then continue an entrepreneurship business that they were building on the side, but they would still be considered financially independent because they could choose not to run their business. Then there were people who really just retired early and did nothing. Like they traveled the world and they relaxed. And there were some people who just took breaks and did what they wanted to do. So I was like, wait, what is this thing? What is FIRE? Who are these people that are pursuing this? And they were people who were working. Some of them, I would say majority of the people that I did listen to were people who worked and had good incomes. There were a few where, their incomes weren't six figures necessarily, but then they also didn't spend a lot, which then allowed them to save. But I was just like, this is something that the average person can possibly do. And at that point, it was myself and my husband, and we were making good money living in New York City. Both of us were earning six figures. And so I was like, you know what? I, in my 20s, couldn't figure out an escape route. I had started businesses on the side. I had an online magazine with my friend. I tried out vending machines. I even tried out real estate. So I got my real estate salesperson's license. I thought maybe I can sell real estate or rent out apartments. So I did all this stuff and realized that, okay, those were not things that I actually enjoyed doing or wanted to do either. So why not, if I'm going to be working in this job that pays me well, that I was very grateful for, but if I'm going to be working here anyway, and let's just say I have to work until standard retirement, what if I'm here and I just make the most of it, but then I'm also saving and investing aggressively so that if I choose and if I can leave earlier, why not? The time is going to pass anyway. So that's what I did. So the FIRE movement, FIRE. The FI stands for financial independence. The RE stands for retire early. And with the blogs and podcasts that I was consuming, which, by the way, the commute almost became my superpower, or the thing that helped me out a lot, because then that's what I would listen to when I was driving to work. I'd learn about general personal finance topics that I wasn't aware about. All these things that eventually helped me to get on track with my finances and to eventually leave my job. So that commute, in a sense, even though it was in some regards very hard, I would say that without that commute, without the, I say nail in the book, without the nail pinching me or sticking in me where it became so uncomfortable I couldn't ignore, I don't know that I would have been so drastic in what I wanted to do with changing my life. And I hope that you take this as a sign that if there is something that is very annoying happening in your life, whether it's the job or commute or place or whatever that is, that yes, I'm a big person. And if you make something your enemy, whatever that is, a person, a situation, that it will push back. It almost says, all right, you're looking at me negatively. I will live up to everything you want me to be, even if it's not much. And so it just makes the situation worse. But I also think that when things are so uncomfortable that we can no longer ignore it, it forces us to dig deep and to make the changes we want to see if we're really fed up about it. So with the commute and then with being pregnant with my first child, I was really motivated to figure out how I could set myself up for success. And with everything I was learning in the blogs and in the podcast, I said to myself, let me start a blog. Let me start a blog to figure out and to show what I was going to do to, at the time, retire early, reach financial independence and retire early at 40 years old. So I gave myself a 7-year timeline for when I initially put my flag in the sand to say I'm ready to go and publicly sharing that with people. Eventually, the blog turned into the podcast, which I felt was very necessary because even though at that time there were a couple podcasts, I didn't really feel like there were podcasts that I just knew a voice was missing in the space. And I said to myself that I want to hear more stories about people I can relate to, people where even as a host, as I'm speaking in plain talk. If I don't understand something, I could say I don't get this. I'm still learning. It felt more like I'm not the expert at the moment. I am learning with you, and I still take that approach today. And so that just makes, for me, the content, hopefully for you, more digestible. It makes it more real that there's a person who you feel like you can connect with, do this. So the podcast started, and I started to learn even more. I started to apply what I was learning, obviously, to my life. And that involved getting my husband on board with the journey. It involved getting a budget together and optimizing our finances. So taking this income that we were receiving and saying, how can we save and invest a majority of it so that we can get to this shared goal? And sometimes we had individual goals about, our lives. Not sometimes, we still do. But how do we get there? And that kind of was the start of us saving and investing $169,000 in 2 years. And we did that by doing what I'm going to tell you as I get further in as just principles of trying to achieve this goal of financial independence and retiring early. And so when we saved all that money, invested that money, and at the same time, Journey to Launch it started to grow some legs. And I started to see other people within the industry making money, doing this full time. And that gave me the motivation and some courage to say, well, I wonder if I can build a brand, build a business that carries me through. That is the vehicle in which I'm still riding on this, car, or in this car that I need to make money. It's my work, but it's something that I love doing. It's something, even if I don't love doing it all the time, I feel very connected to it, and it's on my own terms. I'm not going into an office that I don't want to go into or driving this commute. I literally can create a life that is flexible and that I'm contributing to society and doing something where I feel valued. And I was able to quit my job a lot earlier than that 7-year time frame that I gave myself to reach FIRE because of all the work that I put in over the couple years when I initially started. It was saving and investing, getting our finances in order, and creating these goals for ourselves while building this business. And so by the time I quit, I was on my third child, if you're following the timeline. And I had 3 kids by then. We lived in New York City. But I said to myself, you know what? If there's going to be a time to take a chance and try this thing out, I'm going to do it. And when I say try this out, it meant trying entrepreneurship, seeing if I could make Journey to Launch profitable and give me income that would help towards our financial goals, but then also give me flexibility as now a mother with 3 small kids and all 2 years apart. So all the parents, you understand how hard that is and how much that changes your life. So I always like to tell my origin story, especially for people maybe who are just listening and following me. So journeyers, when I say journeyers, that's anyone on the path with me to achieving financial independence, but experiencing joy, wealth, and happiness along the way, is that, I don't know, I feel like when I meet people who have listened to the podcast from the beginning, they always say one of the things that really connected me to you was that story. And while I gave a very abridged version of it just now, so you can go back to earlier episodes where I talk about this at those stages in my life more in detail. And even I forgot what number of the episode, I'll put it in the show notes, but I have a whole episode about quitting my job and what that moment was like. And that was in real time, as I think I had quit my job already, but I was able to experience that and share it on the podcast. But what I'm realizing as I move further from where I was with that nail in me or being so uncomfortable with my job is that I need to bring back and talk more about this, what I think is the core of my work and why I think this is so important for you to be hearing and so important for you to be on this journey, because money is a tool. And as much as we talk about money, I talk about money, I am not someone who wants to obsess and live my life around money. I had an episode a couple weeks ago, or depending on when you listen to this, just scroll back a couple episodes where I talked about just what is wealth, what is financial freedom in the general sense. Like to the average person, that might look like nice cars and having millions of dollars coming in as income. But for the average person, for the person who is not going to earn $1 million annually, what does financial freedom and independence look like? And so it's not about the money. I know that's hard to sometimes, honestly, to accept, because money is important. It makes everything go around. Money equals how people look at you, regardless if you want to spend it or not. Money matters. It influences everything we do and what we can't do. But ultimately, it's about having the freedom to choose where we live, what we do for work, the people in our lives. And when we don't have money, we have to make choices. We have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do. And when we do have an access to money and resources, it opens up another realm. It opens up other possibilities because you're not stressed about what's happening in your finances. And so ultimately with the book and with my work, what I wanted to capture is I'm talking about this idea of financial independence, which means I might not have even, I don't think I've said the definitions in this episode yet, but financial independence meaning the ability to not have to work actively again, because your investments, your retirement accounts, maybe your real estate, some passive income pays for your expenses. So you literally can choose if you work again or not. So think about that standard retirement that people look forward to or work so hard towards at 65 or 69, 70. But we're talking about having to happen a lot earlier. And so that's where the retire early part comes in. So this idea that you're going to reach financial independence, that I'm calling you, I'm ringing the alarm. I'm sounding the alarm for anyone who is intrigued by this idea, no matter if you think it's impossible or not, that the idea is not about the money, even though it's important. It's about how do you create and live a good life now while on the journey to financial independence. And I do believe that I am currently living that in a way because I'm not completely financially independent yet, but we're on our way, and we have adjusted our timeline a bit because we've changed our mind. I've changed my mind about how much we want to save and spend and enjoy life now, and what to me looks like a good life versus when I first started. And so the timeline kind of has extended for us, but not really, in a sense that we are living, when I close my eyes and I forget, and when I say to myself, okay, forget what's in the bank or how much money comes in a month. Like, are you living the lifestyle you would want to live if you were financially independent? And the answer is mostly yes. Like, of course, like if I had all the money in the world and money was no option, would I get a nicer car? Probably. Would I change homes? I don't know. I mean, probably, but those things are not necessary for me to have in order to enjoy my life. Okay, if you are enjoying this and you're like, listen, Jamila, I need this in my life. I need to understand how this can apply to me. I need help. I want your help. Then I have the perfect solution for you. I am opening up enrollment in my signature course, Map Your Path to Financial Independence, and it will have 4 live group coaching calls, very small group coaching calls with me. So the group coaching calls, I believe, are what's really the benefit in this entire offer, because not only do you get the course, which literally the course itself allows you and helps you map out where you currently are to where you want to be with how do you figure out your FI number, where are you on the journey or level stage, and how do you move through them? What are the scenarios for your current life? Like how, if things change for you when it comes to income or expenses, and how much do you need to invest, and how long will it take you to get your end goal? You have all that in the course. But what you have that I think is really special is access to me in a small group coaching call that's going to happen every Monday in November, where we'll sit down and we'll talk, and I'll be able to help you out with your financial independence plan. So that enrollment is happening now. We are closing doors on this. I don't want this to be a super big group, so it's going to be small. And we're closing doors on this November 3rd. That's the last day you'll be able to enroll, because coaching calls start on November 4th. So I hope to see you in the program. You can go to journeytolaunch.com/coach me to find out more information. I hope to see you where you'll be joining me on the journey. So yes, of course, there are other things I would do if I had more money, but I really do feel like with the life I'm living now, like this is what I'd actually want to do. Today, I did my miles. I ran 7.5 miles. I'm training for the Reggae Marathon in December. Talked about that on my socials if you've been following me. And so I'm training for that, drop the kids off, got to pick them up early. There's basketball practice and tutoring and a bunch of other things that need to happen. But I'm able to do that on my own terms and decide what I want to do for work now. And that feels so good. And if I wanted to take a break, I could. If I wanted to take for example, this summer I did not really work. For the most part, this whole year, kind of, even last year when I was kind of finishing up promoting the book, and even the year before that, writing the book, I was very relaxed in terms of working. I was more focused on the book, promoting the book. And this year really feels more like a year of, I wouldn't say total rest, but a year of being, in a way, a year of not stressing myself out about anything. And so I think this is the goal, is how do you create a financially free life while you're on the journey? And that's what I want to talk a bit about and just go through some terms for if you've been listening or you don't understand or have not heard these before. So financial independence, we defined that already, but what is the number? So I think that's the next thing that comes up for people is, well, how do I know that I would be financially independent? What does that number look like for me? Because it's going to look different for everyone. Because what my financial independence number is, meaning how much I need to be financially secure in which I can draw down on that portfolio, and that portfolio provides me with income, is going to look different for Sally across the street. And that's going to be for many reasons: the stages of life we're in, our expenses, what I call our guac desired levels, which I'll get into, and our starting points. That's another major thing that you have to take into account. Depending on where you find this information and when you start your journey, that's going to look different. Because if someone is starting this journey as maybe a single person earning six figures or multiple six figures, they don't have a lot of expenses, and they want to do this, it's going to look completely different. And they might be able to get there faster than someone who is not earning six figures, who has responsibilities, maybe a child or taking care of a parent or someone in their family, has debt. All that matters on how this time frame looks. So it's really important to take that in mind or consider that. I mean, you can't ignore it as you're on your journey. But I do really feel like the pursuit of financial independence it's that goal that's very big, but in the pursuit of it, you really change yourself. You have to change yourself, but in a good way, in a way that allows you to figure out how to live a good life now. So when I talk about how much money you need, it's going to look different based on your expenses and your starting point. So when I talk about, let's say, my financial independence number, the way you can figure that out is your annual expenses times 25. So you take the annual expenses you'd want to spend. So let's just say you think you want to spend $40,000 a year or $100,000 a year, and that would make you happy, right? You'd multiply that by 25, and that will give you a big number. And that number would be considered your financial independence number. And so assuming you get to that number, you'd be able to draw down on the money in your accounts and not run out of money for a time frame, for a period, and enjoy that. That money would provide your income source that you can now live on. I think the first thing that happens, it happened with me too, is that when you calculate your number, it feels very audacious, and what's helpful to do, and I talk about this in the book, is that you come up with almost 3 scenarios for yourself, almost the baseline of what makes you happy. So like the baseline, not maybe the $4,000 a month apartment or mortgage, but the $2,000 or $1,000. You go down a little bit, but you're still doing it at the bare minimum. That is something that will make you happy. Maybe it's not going out to eat every Friday and Saturday, but it's like going out to eat twice a month. And so what does a budget like that look like for you? A basic budget. And then there's here's like a mid-range budget where I'm living a little bit more. This ties into the walk levels that I'll talk about. And then what is a kind of high end? This is actually what I want. Like if I'd had no restrictions, this is what it would be. And you'll come up with about 3 numbers, 3 FI numbers, financial independent numbers. And you can start to think about if you want to do the work it's going to take to reach those goals. I know when I first started, we decreased our FI number, and which meant decreasing our expectations of how much we wanted to spend because I wanted to reach it faster. I wanted to reach it in 7 years. So I was looking at ways of how do I cut back in terms of our budget, and how do we spend less so that we can reach this goal. And then as I got on my journey a bit more, I realized that, I'm okay with this journey taking longer if I'm able to kind of enjoy it while I'm on it. And so what does it look like if we add back in going out to eat more, vacations, not being so strict with a budget? And that's how my mind changed about things. And it can change again, depending on our situation. So figuring out your FI number is one of the first things you do as you are planning out your journey. And then you have to figure out your starting point, because there's no way you're going to know how long it's going to take you if you don't understand where you're starting, because that FI number is based on your assets. But in order to build your assets and to build that up, you need to understand your current situation. So what's your income? What's your expenses? The expenses are a very important part. I mean, they're all important, but that's how you'll understand how to keep more of your money. What are your assets? So what do you currently own? Whether that is a home or anything in your retirement accounts or investment accounts. And what is your debt? All important things, because you'll have to measure that as you move along to figure out, okay, how much can I save and invest after paying off some debt in order to get to this goal of $1 million? And how can I do that in a realistic way that I can sustain? And sometimes what you'll find out is that depending on where you are in life, you can invest more or less. And then in 5 years, you can invest more or less. And so it's going to be a back and forth. It's not always going to be consistent, but you have to understand that end goal, your FI number, and then that starting point. Okay, other things I want to cover as what I like to say, this is the FI 101 kind of recap, is that there's a wealth formula that I talk about in the book, that I've talked about on the podcast, that helped me when I figured out how money flows and how to make it work for me in my life to make it do what I want it to do, which is income. So your income that comes inside your home, your household, can go but so far, right? And so you need to figure out what your expenses are. So it's income minus not just any expense, but your mandatory expenses. So those are the things you need to pay for to live. So your income minus your mandatory expenses will leave you with what I call the gap. So that's like, let's just say, hopefully a pool of money left over every paycheck or month. For simplicity, let's do month. And that gap, that money, is what you use to pay for discretionary expenses. So these are the nice to have things, like maybe getting your hair done, nails, going to the gym, whatever you deem discretionary. And then the financial goals you'll have, which is save, invest, and pay down debt. So the goal in the equation, all those factors in that equation, is for your income is to maximize your income. So it is to earn. Income is the driving force of all of this. While all parts are important, if you don't have an income that can just even pay for your mandatory expenses, then there's deeper work to be done before you can move further in on to the journier levels that I'll get to, or journier stages. So you have to maximize your income. You have to figure out a plan to make more if you're not making enough. In order to understand that, you have to know your expenses. So you're maximizing your income, but then you want to optimize your expenses. So what are they? That is going through your bank statements. That's going through your credit cards to figure out, what am I actually spending on a monthly basis? And that way you can optimize them. I didn't say cut things back and live super frugal if that's not something you want to do, because I do think we all have to be realistic. I think if you could be frugal, it helps you get a lot further on this journey, a lot faster, but you also have to be realistic with yourself. And so optimizing your expenses means it's not that you have to cut out going out to eat with friends forever, but maybe you're cutting it out or cutting back until you reach a specific goal. Or maybe it is figuring out, what am I wasting money on because of a lack of being prepared or habits that I have to improve. So is that eating out at lunch, at work, because you didn't have time to prepare something? And how does that look if you prepare things for yourself in order to save money? So optimizing your expenses. Then in the gap, where we talk about this kind of pool of money that you want to have so you can make that bigger to reach your goals, is how do you have money, or how do you maximize that money to save for your life goals? How do you have money to invest, right? You want to have money to get to that FI number. And then how do you pay down debt? So the goal of this formula is to figure out how it applies in your financial life, and to understand that if you were to do this formula, you might realize, like, wow, I don't earn enough to even cover my mandatory expenses. Or you might say to yourself, wow, I'm actually earning it's not too bad, but my discretionary expenses are too high. And maybe I need to cut back here so I can put more money into saving, investing, or paying off debt. Okay, next thing I want to cover, the 5 journier stages. Knowing this, or breaking this down, so this is a concept I came up with because I realized that when I came across this concept of financial independence, it just felt so big. Like, what do you mean I need $2 million in 7 years? Like, how is that going to happen? And so I figured that most people, especially when you calculate your number and you figure out where you are and how far you are from that point, it feels just so hard to get to. So I thought to myself, if we could break down the journey to financial independence into stages, I think that would be a lot more helpful. And so the 5 journier stages are the explorer stage. So that is where you are and each stage has a goal. So in the explorer stage, you are working to get to a place of just being able to pay your mandatory expenses, to become stable so that you're not putting things on credit cards and you can just pay for your living expenses. So that's stage 1, the explorer stage. Once you're able to do that, or you've passed that stage, you might say to yourself, okay, I got that. I'm able to pay for my expenses, but now I want to get ahead, So that's stage 2. That is what I call the cadet stage. This is the stage where you're focused on paying off consumer debt. So this is a stage that a lot of people are in. And in this stage, I do not include mortgages or student loans, but you want to be able to pay down your consumer debt. They have the highest interest. So that's credit cards mostly, and anything else that is just of high interest that you want to focus on paying down. And the goal in this stage, in the cadet stage, stage 2, is to pay down or off your consumer debt. Now, there are some people like myself who actually use debt strategically, like on credit cards and travel card hacking. So if you have a reason and a strategy behind keeping certain debt, you decide that. It's your journey. But in stage 2, you're focused on basically getting out of debt. Now, once you're out of stage 2, stage 3 is the aviator stage. That is where you are focused on building your assets. So this is where you don't have consumer debt. Now you can have more money that can be diverted to your investments, to your 401k account, to your Roth IRA, to your traditional IRA, depending on things, to your brokerage accounts. Like you can now funnel more money to save aggressively in those accounts because you are deciding where your money goes. You can also spend more on discretionary items if you want because you are having more control over your money. Now that's stage 3. Stage 4 is the commander stage. That is the work flexibility stage where you have reached or you can now have work flexibility. So that's the stage I'm currently in, where it's not that you have reached your FI number, but you have built a nest egg, you built investments up where you can choose what you want to do. You can have a flexible work situation, whether that is you're working for yourself or working for someone else, but you choose what you want to do. So no longer are you choosing a job because you have to do it. You're doing it because you want to do it. It's you still need to work. Maybe you can take some breaks, a couple years off if you want, but you're approaching this from a place of work flexibility. And then stage 5 is the ultimate captain stage, I call it. That is where you reach your FI number. You really don't have to work if you don't want to, but you can still work if you want to, because I do think most people do want to do something with their lives, whatever that looks like. And so those are the 5 journeyer stages. Again, I go through this in my book, and on the podcast, there have been episodes that just talk about the stages. And I think most people can really quickly find which stage they're in. And then how long it takes you to get through the stages is dependent on many things, right? It depends on the formula that I talked about before and how you relate to that formula, what your income is, what your expenses are. It relates to the stage of life you're in. It all matters when you find this content. Luckily for me, when I discovered the FIRE movement and started Journey to Launch, I was at the ending cadet stage. So I had student loan debt, but because of my job, I would get bonuses. And so I could pay off that student loan debt intentionally with a bonus. So I quickly leapfrogged into the aviator stage when I initially started this journey, which put me ahead a bit, right? Versus someone who, if you're starting this and you have to start from more of the beginner explorer level, doesn't mean you're not going to get to where you need to get, because it's all going to depend on these factors that I'm talking about. But it's really important not to compare your journey or what's going on or how long things are going to take you with anyone else, because you don't know someone else's true privileges or what they have going on for you. Like if there's someone where you want to save money and that they can move back home with a parent, that's going to look different from someone who can't do that, where they can't save that money. So just be aware of that as you're thinking through how long things will take you to get through each stage. The other thing I want to cover that I think is important when talking about this is the guac level. So I call it the guacamole levels, because it's not just as simple as everyone doesn't want to not spend any money or be super frugal. I know that. I'm including myself in that now, because it depends. Like life is short, and I'm not going to say, you need to spend all your money and like spend it on discretionary items. But I just feel like there should be no judgment for people who actually do enjoy certain things versus people who don't. And if that is the case, just be honest with yourself about that. But also know that if you are someone who does like spending more money on the non-appreciating assets in life, then it's just going to take you a bit longer to get through stages, or maybe to have to work in a traditional way because of your tie to these expenses. So the guac levels, I call it the guacamole levels because I just imagine I love guacamole. And so I figure, how can I make this a fun thing that people can relate to? And so the guac levels go from 1 to 5. Guac level 1 is someone who is super frugal. Like you would never order guacamole out at a restaurant. And then guac level 5 is you are fancy as hell. You have your own guacamole factory. You have your own chef that does guacamole for you in your home. Like it's the most expensive way to think about your expenses. And so there's a spectrum there, right? There's guac levels 1 through 5. And you can just totally hone in on a guac level that you want to keep forever. Like the midline is guac 3. That's someone that is like going out to eat here and there and being able to choose when they have guacamole, right? And so you can do that and think about, okay, how do I want my life to look? Am I someone who is living a guac level 4 or 5, but I'm not there yet? I'm in an explorer stage, journeyer stage 1 or 2. So here I am. I like all these nice things and spending on all these nice things, but I'm like still in a ton of debt, or I can't even pay for my basic expenses. And so if that's the case, you'd need to explore that and change that if you are really serious about wanting to achieve financial freedom and independence. If you're someone who you can choose, so this is something that I saw a lot of people do when I first started in the space, where they earned a lot of money, but they just chose not to spend it. And so they were quickly able, and I would say maybe for me that was the case, quickly able to cut things back and go to a guac level 1 or 2 while they were in certain stages of their life to get them ahead. And so think about where you're currently spending, how you're spending, and if that guac level is something that's keeping you back. Is it something you can pull back from and then do again once you're financially stable and further along? Or in some instances, there's people who are actually not spending enough. You have money, but you're also afraid to spend it. That's a whole nother podcast. And so thinking about that, I think it was helpful for me to come up with that matrix of where am I? Like, what am I spending my money on? And you can actually be a guac level 1 in certain areas of your life. Like for me, that's probably hair care and nails. I don't like spending any money on those things. Even though I do like how I look when it's done, I'm just like, ugh, I don't like that. Versus I know some people, some friends, they're guac level 3, 4, or 5 when it comes to their beauty upkeep. But then in other areas of their life, they're like a guac level 1 or 2. So it can be different based on what the expense is. But I thought it's important to know if you have a higher guac level and you're committed to staying there, then your FI number will need to be higher. And that means either your income is going to have to be super high to help cover that and save and invest so that you can have enough money to reach financial independence, or you'll just have to figure out if that's something you want to hold on to, or can you pull it back a bit and still be happy. So I hope that was all helpful for you, but I really wanted to give a breakdown, as like I said before in the beginning of this podcast, that, you know, kind of getting back to the basics of why Jamila wanted to start talking about this. It's like talking about this and trying to help people through the stages and figure out their guac levels and what that looks like excited me. It helped me so much when I did it in my own life. And when I started to share it with my audience, with you journeyers, that I was just like, okay, I got to bring this back a bit for some new journeyers who are listening, or to help hopefully encourage you and get you excited about your own journey. The thing that I want you to leave this podcast with, this episode, is that while that journey to financial independence may seem like long and big, like a big goal, I really do feel like most people, I think everyone can get to at least stage 4, which is that work flexible stage, which is the stage I'm in. And I think no matter what, you can't fail at this journey because once you start, all the things you'll need to do to get your finances in order, like the basic personal finance stuff, like, you know, having a budget or understanding what your budgeting style is, being able to advocate for more money at your job and negotiate, look for better jobs, speaking up for yourself, in learning about investing, figuring out your 401k options, all of these little things change you. And you'll be surprised how in that changing who you are and becoming your highest and best self, it outside of finances, but like you having the courage, like to say to yourself, you know what, even if I don't understand this, I'm going to try it anyway. Even if I'm afraid to speak up, I'm going to speak up for myself in this moment. Like those are the things that make you your best asset, not the bank account, not the investment. And from there, that's when I believe the opportunities and happiness, that's where it lives. And you'd be surprised how quickly things can change for you. So that is what I'm going to leave you with. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm on social media at Journey to Launch and at Jamila Souffrant. If you're listening, take a screenshot, share it with me, tag me, at me, and then also share it with someone. So click on that share button wherever you're listening to this and share it with a family member, friend. You don't have to go on this journey alone. And that, you know, there's more. The life that you are dreaming of, it's there. It's there for you to claim. And here's your invitation to claim it with me. Okay, until next week, keep on journeying, journeyers. Don't forget, you can get the episode show notes for this episode by going to journeytolaunch.com or click the description of wherever you're listening to this. And you can still grab your Jumpstart Guide for free to help you on your journey to financial freedom by going to journeytolaunch.com/jumpstart. If you want to support me and the podcast and love the free content and information that you get here, here are 4 ways that you can support me and the show. 1, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you listen, whether that's Apple Podcasts, that purple app on your phone, your Android device, YouTube, Spotify, wherever it is that you happen to listen, just subscribe so you are not missing an episode. And if you're happening to listen to this in Apple Podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe there. I appreciate and read every single review. Number 2, follow me on my social media accounts. I'm at Journey to Launch on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I love, love, love interacting with journeyers there. 3, support and check out the sponsors of this show if you hear something that interests you. Sponsors are the main ways we keep the podcast lights on here, so show them some love for supporting your girl. 4, and last but not least, share this episode, this podcast with a friend or family member or coworker so that we can spread the message of Journey to Launch. All right, that's it. Until next week, keep on journeying, journeyers.